here's the deal. Now, Matt Ryan can ball. I mean, look at his numbers from last year, right? He completed 65% of his passes. He threw for over 4,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Booger, you know what really hits me about Matt Ryan? I know they've had a slew of injuries, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, which is not his fault. But I haven't gotten over that Super Bowl loss. I haven't gotten over you having a 25-point lead and blowing it. I haven't gotten over the experience that you have and the cachet that you had to audible and not follow Kyle Shanahan's game plan of throwing the damn football instead of running and chewing out the clock when you got a 25-point lead. I haven't forgotten all of that. But here's the other thing. Not only do you have Julio Jones, and we all know how great he is, I got news for you. Calvin Ridley ain't shabby. And even though Mohamed Sanu ain't there any longer, he wasn't shabby either. Now, granted, Pitts, the tight end, we're saying that we ain't seen anybody like him. I got that. I really, really do. But don't you think we've seen enough from Matt Ryan where we need to at least plan for within the next 2 years for this guy to be gone? I think so. I think you got to think about moving in that direction. They lucked up when Michael Vick, wasn't responsible enough at the time to handle, admittedly so. I'm not knocking him because I'm very proud of how he's turned his life around and what he's become. And he does a great job on TV and all of that. But we all know how irresponsible he was when he was the star in Atlanta. And they lucked up being in a position to have Matt Ryan. Well, now, you fast forward all of these years later, they're lucky to be in a position again where they can end up grabbing somebody like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, dare I say. It's something they need to consider. I really believe that.
Well, I would say this. Matt Ryan is a very good quarterback. I never thought he was a great quarterback, but he was good enough, Stephen A., that you have a problem with him collapsing with that big lead. He's good enough to have a big lead late in the Super Bowl. That's pretty good. And he's still a very good quarterback. Again, maybe not great, but very good enough to win a Super Bowl with. But the reason they're selecting so high is because they didn't win a lot. And the reason didn't win a lot, I don't think, is Matt Ryan. I think there are too many holes. Football is a game where there's so much to address. They got to address the offensive line. They got to address the secondary. There's a lot of stuff to address. So this pick is the most interesting to me among the teams with the top picks in the draft because they could go so many different ways. You could always take Kyle Pitts because that's the best available player. Don't draft for need if an obvious best player is there. I would understand that. Or you could draft an offensive lineman, best available offensive lineman. Or you can go different ways. I would say take Trey Lance. Assuming, and it looks like Mac Jones will go to the Niners, but let's assume that that Justin Fields is guy. I mean, if I were the Niners, I'd take Justin Fields. Trey Lance, to me, is a guy with the lowest floor and the highest ceiling of all these quarterbacks, arguably the highest ceiling. But because of his limited experience, it may take some time. Well, that's perfect, because in Atlanta, you have some time. It's not like if you take Kyle Pitts or Sewell or whoever it is, one top player, now you plug them in and boom, the Falcons are ready to win. They got a couple of drafts to go. And Matt Ryan's contract is such now that while he's still effective, you might as well play him because you're going to have to pay him. And if you try to trade him in the next 2 years, it's an enormous cap hit. So you're not going to do that. It's the perfect time, when you may not draft this high in the foreseeable future, to grab a quarterback. And the reason Trey Lance, to me, is the right guy is his enormous upside, but the time it could take for him to develop. It kind of lines up perfectly. With so many holes to fill, my point is you're not going to do it all in one draft. You might as well grab a guy if they believe that he can be the franchise quarterback to follow Matt Ryan a couple of years down the road.
So when do you stick with the aging veteran and build around him? When do you do what Tampa has done and take a 43-year-old Tom Brady and build around him? When do you do what New Orleans did with Drew Brees and build around him. You do it when your team is ready to win. So now let's look at the Atlanta Falcons. Let's say we kept Matt Ryan and we took Kyle Pitts at the 4th pick and we took this offense to another level. Is this team ready to win? No, because their defense is terrible. Their defense was one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL last year. Even when Raheem Morris took over and they got a little better, they were still bad. So there is no way you can say take Kyle Pitts, even though Kyle Pitts is one of one. He is a unicorn. He is a once-in-a-generation tight end that we may not see for another 5 to 10 years. A guy that is 6'6", 250 and can run 4.4 in the 40. They don't make those. He'll come into the NFL and be a top 5 tight end when he gets in, but he doesn't make your team better. So if you're Arthur Smith and you're Terry Fontenot, the GM, and you're the Atlanta Falcons, you have to ask yourself, and you have to be honest. See, sometimes this is tough for us to do as men. Look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves. We want to pacify others and say, yeah, we're ready to win right now. We're going to win the Super Bowl. They aren't close to winning the Super Bowl in Atlanta. So they have to say, let's take a step back. Let's fix the other parts of our team. Let's take the quarterback. Let's take Matt Ryan and get something for him. We can get something for him, whether it's a 3 or 4, whatever the draft capital we can get for him, because in a quarterback-starved age as we are in, teams will give up anything. Somebody traded for Carson Wentz, and we saw how bad he's played. So they will trade for any quarterback that can walk in a straight line and throw the football. So you get something for Matt Ryan, and you move forward with Trey Lance. You rebuild. And now if you're Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, you have an opportunity to build with your plan, with your quarterback, and you fix your defense. Because holistically, even though one part of your team is ready to win, if everybody's not ready to win, then you're wasting time and spinning your wheels.
I'll tell you this, though. I'd like to know this from you, Booger. Why are we talking about Trey Lance instead of Justin Fields at the number 4 spot, assuming that Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones are going to go 1, 2, 3?
Here's what I'll say, Stephen A. The quarterback with the highest ceiling but also the lowest floor is Trey Lance, just because he only played a minimal number of games. His resume is short and he played at a lower level. So we don't have a really good idea. This is all about mitigating risk, okay? Why is Trevor Lawrence the number 1 overall pick and looked at as a can't-miss generational pick? He checks all the boxes. He was 34-2 as a starter. He's played a lot of football. He's 6'6", 240 pounds, and he can run. He's mobile. He's athletic. So from a trait standpoint, Stephen, he checks all the boxes. There's nothing he doesn't check. He's thrown the football. There is a lot of tape to minimize making a bad pick for him. Everyone else, there's a very minimal resume. And when you look at Trey Lance playing at the FCS level, there's even another knock, another risk there, because you don't know if he can do it against higher level competition. He may well go to a situation in the top 10 that's going to be great for him, but it's going to come down to, can he get with a coach that can minimize his negatives and accentuate his positives like all the great coaches should do? And if he does, he'll be successful. Here's what I'll say. All these quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10. I think all 5 of them are going in the top 10 this year. I think where they go is where we're really not sure.
Well,
I think the 2 key spots in this draft are going to be San Francisco at 3. Mm-hmm. I personally think San Francisco at 3 is taking Justin Fields. And then I think at 4, Atlanta is going to have their choice at 4. Do you take Trey Lance? What about a Mac Jones? What about someone else there at the number 4 spot? I think that's where it'll start to get really, really interesting.
I will say this, and I want to state this, and I want comments from both you and Max about this. If Justin Fields falls out of the top 10, I want an investigation. I want an investigation into these NFL teams. This guy was considered the second best quarterback coming out of college at the end of the season after they had lost the national championship game. He hasn't thrown an interception. He hasn't turned over the football. He hasn't lost a game since he was considered the second best prospect from Ohio State. He was considered the second best prospect behind Trevor Lawrence, who, by the way, he beat. You want to put Trevor Lawrence in there? No problem whatsoever. Listen, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, I got nothing but respect for those brothers and what they did on the collegiate level. But when Justin Fields dips from number 2 to number 5 and nothing has happened in the offseason, I'm suspicious of that.
Right,
I agree with Booger. I think there's a good chance the Niners are, thinking, like, making everyone think they're going to zig, and maybe they wind up zagging and taking Justin Fields. The reason I like Trey Lance, Boog, especially for the Falcons, is it looks like it's going to take a couple years. I don't think you could trade Matt Ryan, not because you can't get something for him, but the cap hit you take is going to be so devastating. I don't think you trade out of 4 to try to plug in holes because there are too many holes to plug in. Like you mentioned, you take their secondary. Really, one of the issues is it's young. You ain't getting any more veteran in the draft.
Right.
That's not going to be good for a while. But if you can draft Matt Ryan's replacement now, a guy who you don't want to start for the next maybe year or two and can hold the clipboard for Matt Ryan. Now you can ride out whatever Matt Ryan has left. You try to put a good young team, an ascending team around him. Maybe they do something, but if they don't, you have it ready for Trey Lance when he's ready. Justin Fields, Stephen A., one of the issues might be he might be ready a little too soon. Now you got a quarterback controversy.